It's time for the Phil Ferguson Show.
Happy New Year! Hello, everybody. This is Phil Ferguson, and you are listening to The Phil Ferguson Show. I am so delighted that you have joined us. It is the extreme end of the calendar year 21, or if you're listening to this podcast a few days after it's put up, welcome to 2022. And I do hope and wish and dream, dare I say, I pray, that 2022 will be a better year for you and yours than 21 or 2020 were. Fingers crossed. Of course, we now have the raging Omicron variant. Omicron, something like that. Another variant to play with that has a few more breakthrough cases. You're still much way to fuck better off if you're fully vaccinated and boosted. So please, if you have not done that, go do that. Just a few days ago, I actually got my flu shot. Now, I already have 3 Pfizer shots, so I think I'm good for now. But in the future, if Pfizer or somebody else comes out with a new, updated, changed, twisted, manipulated shot that is better against Omicron, I'm probably going to try to get myself to the front of the line to get yet another shot. It's truly staggering with this information and the data and the facts and the fact that we've been dealing with this for almost 2 solid years now, that there are people who are still opposed to getting vaccinations. And extra humorous bit, I saw a video where the Trumpster was on stage in front of a sad and pathetic little crowd, where he told them that not only did he get his vaccination shots, he got the booster, and a small segment of the crowd booed him. So whatever. God, can't he just go the fuck away? All right. Anyway, for today, we have some good stuff. I have another super shitty fun that I think you're going to like. And then a conversation with Marcin. I think I pronounced that right. It's another loss of faith story, which I know you're going to enjoy. So I am kind of hunkering down for January and December, trying to go out as little as humanly possible while the new variant burns through the population. And then maybe by spring, it'll all be mostly over. I don't think it's going to go away. I kind of feel like this is going to be a year-to-year thing, and we're going to have to find some kind of happy balance. I guess the big things are stay away from large crowds, large gatherings of people, especially if that large gathering is indoors and no one wears their masks at all. But try to wear your mask, try to be safe, try to stay healthy, wash your hands, wear a mask. Oh, by the way, get a good mask. The cloth masks are for show. They kind of sort of work. The little medical surgical masks, the blue ones with the different layers, they work much better. But for me, unless I'm doing a really quick hop in and out of somewhere, I might wear one of those surgical masks. But for me, for the most part now, I am going to be wearing only the N95s. I got a real nice one that is a much wider so that all of the air doesn't go out by my nose and fog up my glasses, especially in the winter. Much happier with that style of mask. Anyway, I don't know. I'm just rambling now. So we're going to take a quick break, and we're going to hear about a super shitty fund, and then we're going to hear about another person that has found their way out of religion. I hope that this reaches to somebody who's listening that might be saying, I'm here for the financial stuff, Phil, and that's cool. Listen to these stories. Listen to these stories and listen to the people talking and how they found their way out. Maybe you can too. But we'll be right back.
My name is Annie Drian, and I'm founder of Cosmos Studios and honored to have been the longtime collaborator of Carl Sagan. And I'd like to say that I think it's just the opposite of what you're saying from my perspective, humbly. One is that I think that science tolerates the unknown in a way that religion doesn't. My argument is not with people who search for God. My argument is with people who feel that our understanding of God is completed. And those are the people who make so much of our existence on this planet such a hell, because they really think that they have the right to kill other people, to hurt them, because of what they understand God's will to be. That's a very destructive thing. So science is, the whole methodology of science is saying that we are not permitted these absolute truths that religion pretends to have, that we do not know the answer to these questions, and not only that, but the little that we think we do know, if you can prove us wrong, we'll give you our highest reward. And that's part of the methodology. That's part of the whole functioning of the system itself. So yes, in answer to what Joan was saying earlier, scientists do terrible things. Scientists have biases. Religious people do terrible things, and they have biases. But absolutely intrinsic to the whole the methodology of science is that error-correcting mechanism, which says we must never lose sight of that. That's not in religion. That's not present at all. Talk about humble. It's the fact that we do science and that we can bring ourselves to see that little tiny earth in Carolyn's presentation. That is humility. What science has done for us spiritually is that it has been the only thing that I know of that has compelled us to wean ourselves of our infantile need for centrality. And that was present, that is very much the essence of so many religious formulations of where we come from, why we came to be. It's the sign of mental health, that we can bear to think that this planet was perfectly fine for 4.5 billion years without us. That cosmic evolution goes on for 13.5 billion years before we even get here. How long have we been in science? How long have we systematically been looking at nature? Not even 400 years. And yet science gets us out to Enceladus. It takes us out of the solar system. It enables us to wean ourselves of that spiritual narcissism which compelled us to be at the center of everything. So when it comes to humility, when it comes to a tolerance for ambiguity and for the unknown, I think science worships the unknown. I think scientists are most comfortable in that place of not knowing. And that's where they live. And that's the great strength of science. So I would respectfully disagree.
The Phil Ferguson Show is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Nothing said on the show should be interpreted as personalized investment advice. Investments should be based on your personal situation, and you, of course, should consult with your financial advisor or tax professional before taking any actions.
You're listening to The Phil Ferguson Show.
This Investing Skeptically segment is one of the regulars. It is a super shitty fund. I've already talked about this fund company in the past, but they send me some more gold in my emails. It's called America First. Yes, that's right, America First. Previously, I talked about their unwoke fund. So that's another segment. You can go find it if you want. But this one is different. This is the Large Cap Share Buyback Fund. And then in the email it says, quote, since 1976, an equal weighted portfolio of the top 100 buyback stocks of the S&P 500 have dramatically outperformed the S&P 500. Well, that sounds pretty nice. And they got a cute little graph here showing investments in the S&P 500 and the top 100 share buyback on a graph. I don't know that it tells me. There's a lot of footnotes. Nah, I don't know exactly where the data comes from, but it kind of implies, like, since 1976, man, that's 24, 21, 45, 47 years that this has worked. Well, that's absolutely amazing. Well, how long has this fund been around? Oh, about 3.5 years. Wow. I bet if you lopped off the end of this chart, yes, it would, of course. 3.5 years ago, it still would have been true that the top 100 buyback stocks would have trounced the S&P 500 according to their graph. I've not pulled the data anywhere, but I thought this was interesting. By the way, it comes in 3 different share classes, and this is often indicated by the little letter hanging out at the end of the name of the fund. And so, for example, Morningstar.com, you can go to and put in the symbol. I'm going to just go with this one, SBQAX. SBQAX. Which one is that? That is the A shares with a 5% front end load. So if you put in 100,000, you lose $5,000 right off the top. So they've got to make 5%, 5.25%, something like that, more than anything else that you have, or more than the thing they're comparing themselves to, just to break even. That's tough. That's real rough. So I pulled it up on Morningstar, like I said. The adjusted expense ratio is 2.15%. So that's a doozy. Oh my God. I didn't notice this before. Turnover, 547%. 547%. So they're buying stocks that are buying back their own shares. The companies are buying back their own shares of their own stock, but they're not holding them. So it's not like a long-term strategy that they're employing here. I don't know what the hell is. So turnover, if a mutual fund owns 30 different companies, and during the year it sells 30 companies and buys 30 replacement companies, it would have a 100% turnover. In an IRA, this doesn't matter as much as from a tax perspective, but if it's in a taxable account, that means virtually everything you ever get out of this fund, assuming you make money in this fund, is all going to be at the short-term earned income tax rates, the tax rates that everyone talks about, the 22, 24, 32, 37%, plus your state. You could easily lose 40 to 50% of any gains on this every year, year after year, because of that huge turnover, where if you have an index fund that has a 2 or 5 or 10% turnover, the vast majority of your gains every year aren't taxed because they are just staying in what you own. And so you get to compound year after year after year over time and only pay taxes on the things that are sold within the fund or when you sell shares. I'll talk about performance more in a minute, but I went to their website and found a 2-page, very pretty, very sexy document. And of course, remember, share buyback fund. They give you the impression that that's their strategy. They showed a graph in the email they sent to me that it works. And here's some text here I'm going to read off this pamphlet. This is under the category of strategy attributes. Quote, our research indicates a portfolio of stocks comprised of companies that have purchased their own stock tend to produce relatively better results in down markets while also producing positive excess returns in up markets as compared to the S&P 500. That's a pretty fucking bold statement. So they're not only beating the market when it goes up, they're beating the market when it goes down, or the losses aren't as bad. Whew. Okay, I continue. The fund seeks to capture this share buyback anomaly by owning market leaders that have purchased their own stock over the last 12 months. So if these are companies that have bought more of their stock back in the last 12 months, they buy them but because their turnover is 500%, they then sell them a few weeks later. That doesn't make... Okay. Next section, rules-based selection process. Why? What do you mean process? Didn't you already? Okay. The large cap share buyback fund applies multi-factor screening. All right. I mean, if you weren't out already, this is probably the moment you should leave. Multi-factor screening criteria for a universe of the top 100 buyback stocks in the S&P 500. And then it says that they consider sales and growth factors, price momentum factors, and valuation factors. So those are three things that they consider, and none of those three things are stock buyback. So factors are a different way to slice and dice stocks or the stock market. You could say that, for example, when I say put money in the small cap value fund, you could call that the small cap factor. Doesn't really fit. In my mind, it doesn't really fit. Those are market segments. But price momentum factor, valuation factor, sales, earnings, and growth factor, all three of those are not the primary thing that they have in the title and what they're promoting. But okay, so maybe they have four different things that they look at. And I highlighted this section here, a common sense and multi-factor approach. I think those are in conflict, but that's just me. Quote, the utilization of individual factors can be cyclical and may require precise market timing to maximize returns. In its research, DDS, America First, has discovered that a multi-factor approach may result in increased potential reward while potentially reducing risk as compared with single factor strategies alone. Okay, that had nothing to do, again, with stock buyback. And then I continue here. Rather than focusing on a single driver to return, okay, America First uses multi-factor approach that ranks the top 100 S&P buyback stocks based on their sales growth, valuations, capital efficiency, and balance sheet strength. Okay, one more, and then I'm going to go into some of the math at Morningstar. In addition, we allocate on an equal weight basis in an attempt to provide better diversification by avoiding concentration of portfolio in a few big stocks. This means the risk is spread across a wider range of companies, and your investment may be more resilient to changes in one or two underlying securities. Well, duh. So if you buy a bunch of stocks, you have less volatility than a couple of stocks. I wonder how many stocks do they own? So now I'm back to Morningstar.com, and I'm going to click on the portfolio tab. And the portfolio tab says number of equity holdings, 51. So apparently they're looking at the 100 stocks of the S&P 500-ish, and then applying their three magical factors to that subset of 100 companies. And at this time, they've decided to buy only 51 of them, not all 100. And of course, without some detailed analysis, I have no way to know that they're not just throwing darts at a board with the company stocks taped up. I don't know. They're claiming all this stuff, but they also claim that they beat the market. So let's take a look at that. I've got two different tabs open here. Calendar year 2018, the S&P 500 was minus 4.38. The fund was minus 5.32. Now, not a particularly big movement for an entire year, 4%, minus 4.38. But their initial claim was that they don't go down as far as the market when the market goes down. And in this case, they went down more. All right, fair enough. 2019, the U.S. S&P 500 up 31.49, and these guys made 22%, short about 10%. Calendar year 2020, not 21, but the year before, 2020, the S&P 500 was up 18.4, and they lost 2.69. So an underperformance of 22%, something like that. Wow. When the S&P 500 is up almost 18+%, they lose 3. That's pretty big fucking loss. The 3-year return, here, do they have that? They're showing as 16.9 and the index is 27.5. So on average, they're falling behind by 11% per year, which might suggest, maybe, it's not necessarily true, if the long-term average for stocks is 10%, if these guys are underperforming by 11%, not only are you not going to get the 10%, you're going to lose money. You're going to be sucking an egg while the stock market rolls along at just a humble 10%. You're going to be losing money. You could theoretically lose money in this bad boy as it just goes along. Wow, that's pretty brutal. And all of that for a 2.15% expense ratio and a 5% front end load to get in. And there was something else. Let's see if I don't know where I read it. Oh, I think I know where I read it. Over here. Nope, not there. Anyway, just forget it. But that's another example of a super shitty fund that has a vision that I don't even think they're following it, but they think that they can do better. Oh, here it is. The gross annual fund operating expense ratio for the iShares is 1.67. The net operating expense ratio is 2.93. I honestly don't know what that means. I think maybe they're making sure that they're distinguishing between the expense ratio published on documents and the actual ongoing total cost to run the fund. As I've discussed before, when you look up, and I have my air quotes up, expense ratio for any mutual fund, the expense ratio includes everything that must be included in that category. But it does not include things that aren't necessary to be included in that category by some government rule or regulation. So the expense ratio of a mutual fund is a reasonably good way to compare funds to each other, but it's not every expense. There's a lot of expenses, potentially a lot of expenses that can be racked up that aren't included in the expense ratio because they don't have to be. That's why they're calling this the net operating expense ratio. But I'm still worried about the net. And I think the reason it's that is because they're talking about they've agreed to temporarily, when the fuck is this document from? It doesn't say. To temporarily waive some expenses. So their operating expenses, which is part of the expense ratio, is limited to 1.5% for now. But that goes until at least until 10/31 of 2020. How is this document even still in existence? Because that's more than a year old. So anyway, another broken promise. The email indicates that they found a way by buying stock in companies that buy their own stocks back, that there might be something magical in it. They show you this data from 1976, and then they don't even, allegedly, they don't even follow the strategy of buying those 100 stocks. So the graph is completely meaningless, even if it is true, and it might be. But then they throw in other factors to magically make it even betterer than the thing that they said that was already great. So it's just a losing idea, one after another, stacked on top of themselves. So hope you enjoyed another example of a super shitty fund.
A lot of people come up here and they thank Jesus for this award. I want you to know that no one had less to do with this award than Jesus. He didn't help me a bit. If it was up to him, Caesar Milan would be up here with that damn dog. So all I can say is, suck it, Jesus, this award is my God now!
The Phil Ferguson Show is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Nothing said on the show should be interpreted as personalized investment advice. Investments should be based on your personal situation, and you, of course, should consult with your financial advisor or tax professional before taking any actions.
You're listening to The Bill Ferguson Show.
All right, everybody, it's time for another personal story, I guess, a loss of faith story. And today I have with me Marcin. How are you today?
I'm doing good, sir. How about you?
I am well, thank you. And in the pre-show, which doesn't exist, I mean, you and I talked, but no one else gets to hear it. We found out that you live close to where I grew up. I don't want to get too specifics because if someone knows where I grew up, they could figure out you're close to that. But it was a nice coincidence in the Chicago suburbs. But you weren't always in Chicago. As a matter of fact, in the email you sent me, you mentioned you grew up in another place, another part of the world. Where was that?
I did, yes. So I grew up in Poland. I was actually born and raised over there, and I didn't come over to the great Chicagoland area until I was 19, which is quite some time ago. And I, ever since, have settled here in Chicagoland area and kind of just continued my life over here.
Sure. Now, you came from Poland, you said at 19, roughly. I'm assuming you speak Polish.
I do speak Polish, yes. That was my first language, so I'm fluent in it. And unlike some people that have been here for a few months, I haven't forgotten it. So it's quite hard to do.
It's an interesting thing. I don't know if I ever mentioned it on one of the podcasts that you might have heard, but my son is conversational in Polish.
Oh, yeah. I did know that you were visiting at some point in pre-COVID days.
Yes.
I know that you spent some time over there and visited quite a few areas of Poland, so I'm sure that you liked it as well. And yeah, you mentioned that your son is conversational in the language.
Well, he stayed for most of a year in Bydgoszcz.
Mm-hmm.
And when we were there, we had the luxury of staying in Warsaw, and then we also stayed in Krakow, or Kraków, I think some people call it.
Mm-hmm.
And we even went up to Gdańsk. I'm sorry, I'm probably butchering it. And
no, that's good.
And Gdynia,
Gdynia, yes.
Gdynia, which
Yeah,
I coin as the Northern Riviera.
Northern Riviera, yes, a very cold one.
Yeah, indeed. And it's funny because I'm looking at Google Earth, and it's hard for me to know, but the reference point I give Americans, because most Americans, I think, because I thought it myself, is kind of Europe is kind of the same north-south on the globe as the U.S. But if you draw a latitude line from Chicago around the globe, you hit Rome.
Yeah.
And
Yep. Yeah,
so you go all the way up through Rome, through Switzerland. You can go through Austria or Germany and the Czech Republic, and then you're angling over a little bit towards Belarus and stuff, and you get to Poland. That's pretty far north, and right now, actually, with the winter solstice coming, how long could the sunlight be out in the extreme northern Poland on the winter solstice? What do you think?
It's going to be very similar to probably Wisconsin area. I would kind of directly compare it to maybe Wisconsin climate as well. Same 4 seasons. You have winter that tends to be snowy and cold. You have summer that is milder than, for example, Chicago's humidity.
Yeah.
But it can get easily into upper 80s and last good 2 months. So that's kind of, you would get pretty much the same 4 seasons and the same length of the day and length of the night as we do have right now.
When we were staying in Warsaw, it was dark for about 4 to 5 hours because we happened to be there near the summer solstice. And the place that we had no air conditioning. And we were talking to the owner, or the person who rents it out at least, and they said they've never really needed air conditioning until recently.
That's correct.
And we closed all the windows and pulled all the curtain. Actually, no, we left all the windows open and all the curtains open to try to get in some cool night air. And about 2 a.m, we started to get a little bit of daybreak, sunrise light, and the birds all went crazy at 2 a.m.
Yeah, it can happen during the solstice.
Yeah, so that was good. And so you were in Poland, and you had in your email, I guess, you actually met the Pope?
Yes, so I actually come from an area down south in Poland, sort of southwest of Krakow, and I was only about 10 to 12 miles away from the town where the Pope was born, and I was actually born in the same town. So the whole notion of Pope being a Polish person that got elected to be head of the church was really a proud moment for the entire country, and everybody embraced it, or most of the country embraced it, and certainly the Catholic and the faith notion was really strong. So as I was growing up, living in a smaller village and having everybody that knew one another, and everybody went to the same church, and everybody kind of did the same things during the holidays, and you had certain activities that most of the youth was participating in, and I actually was one of the members of a youth choir, and certain arrangements were made for that youth choir to kind of visit Rome in one of the springs in the 90s, and I was probably early teenager by then, and we did end up having a what used to be called an audience with the Pope,
right?
Where you kind of go in as a group, and they sort of keep it as a almost like an assembly line type of a movement, where one group goes in and then he spends a few minutes over there, and then another group goes in, and you of course are expected to bring some gifts for the Pope as a group, and so on and so forth. And there is also a photo opportunity, obviously. And during that photo opportunity, I was actually placed in a row of kids that made a gap in the middle for the Pope to stand. So he actually stood right next to me and put his hand on my head, and the other hand on the other person's head that was on his other side. But I guess even the papal blessing and then placing of the hands or laying of the hands didn't really help me retain the faith, and that's kind of my story of the conversion later on in life. And I guess there wasn't anything special about the Pope that would make me a nice and faithful member of the Catholic flock.
Sure. When did you get to the United States?
So I got to the United States in 2000. So right after I graduated high school, I came over and later did the college over here, and stayed with my father at the time, who was here in the United States throughout my childhood. And since 2000, I've been here.
Nice. Now I'm thinking 2000. Is that before? Were you here before or right after 9/11?
I was here before 9/11, so I was actually attending college when that happened. I actually remember driving to school and having radio on, and that's when when the news first broke out. And by the time I got to school and parked in the parking lot and made my way to the building, all of the TVs at the time, since there weren't monitors, but all of the TVs in the hallway were showing the news. And yeah, that was quite some time.
Wow. Yeah, I can imagine. And now, at some point, you mentioned already you visited the Pope. Everyone grew up Catholic in your town. There wasn't really a choice or an option, or probably we wouldn't even know what to call someone who's not Catholic.
Exactly.
But at some point, you left the religion. You left the church. Walk us through that. And when did that happen?
Sure. So throughout just maybe my early adulthood and when I was a teenager, and I wasn't maybe too rebellious, so I followed the guidelines, and I went to church most of the Sundays and then throughout the week, and I also was an altar boy for about 10 years. So really, those thoughts didn't happen until maybe high school, and I'm a very logical thinker, and just just processing the information that the church was giving you, or very little information that it was giving to you, some things weren't really making sense, and you were maybe debating this with your friends and trying to kind of come up with what does it really mean, and the notion of heaven and hell was kind of hard to comprehend, and even just the entire teachings of the free will, and you can do whatever you want, but God still loves you, and so on and so forth. There was not very much logical to me. The whole idea that, let's say, if you are a sinner and if you lead a bad life and you end up going to hell, well, if God is omnipotent and all-knowing, and even before you were born, he knew that you were going to end up in hell, what is the point of your life then if you're going to go to hell anyway? So things like that started popping up in my head, and later on it just kind of led into more and more questions, but I was just kind of brushing them under the carpet at that time.
And did you decide you were an atheist? You put in your email around 2011, of course, so that was 10 years after you showed up in the United States, 10, 11 years. What kind of led you to be in that position?
So the initial thoughts kind of got maybe not disturbed, but they got a little bit fed with more fuel when I attended Elmhurst College, and one of the prerequisites for graduation from Elmhurst was to take a Bible study class, and I picked the Bible study from the offering. I think it was one of my last semesters, just to be done with it. But it turned out to be quite interesting class, because the person that was teaching this, and I think he was a professor of theology, I don't think it was a pastor, but he made it quite interesting by going through different chapters of the Bible, and then when we got to the Gospels, it really was an eye-opener for me, because I never really kind of read the Gospels cover to cover myself. I mean, Catholic Church is not really big on people reading the Bible.
They sure aren't.
They just feed you whatever they want to feed you. And in that class, I finally found out what the Bible really says. And then when you try to cross-compare the Gospels one to another, you start to see those contradictions. And while the professor was trying to make sure that he teaches us everything that the Bible says, and kind of points out how there's good things and how the God is great, and maybe some personal stories of his experience with God and so on and so forth. Me being the person that kind of values the logical side of things, well, I couldn't really go past all of these contradictions, and it started even making more sense to me that those previous questions from the previous time in life were really warranted. And I kind of pretty much started doubting more seriously, and kind of saw the entire faith as just something that is probably constructed to make sure that people have something to follow, and you can use it as a kind of carrot and a stick type of a environment for the populace. And but then I kind of let it go for about 5 or 6 years after my graduation, until I started browsing YouTube a little bit more, and then the algorithms took over and started suggesting certain videos, and then I stumbled upon the series from the YouTuber named Evidence, with those number 3s replacing E's.
Right.
And that was really kind of nice introduction into how to fully let go of your faith.
That's nice. And just for the listeners, is that channel still a going thing? Do you know?
It might be. I think it might be.
I'm going to Google it right now.
I think the video was called "Why I'm No Longer a Christian." I think that's why it had a kind of catchy title, and that's what grabbed my attention.
Very, very nice. Yeah, and of course, you also point out here that you started watching debates and hearing words and arguments and stuff from Hitchens and Dawkins at that time.
Exactly, yeah, and really the channel of that user evidence was really an eye opener, because it was a nice series put together of multiple videos. I think it's probably like 4 or 5 hours together, where he goes step by step through his deconversion, and a discussion with, I think, some sort of a theological professor or someone that walks him through to the fact that we don't know who wrote the Bible, and we don't even know when it was written. And then you talk about the translations of a copy, and finishing that kind of got me into, okay, well, what other videos are there? And since this is such a strong evidence for not believing in God and not subscribing to any faith, I naturally started watching the debate.
In a medical crisis,
stumbling upon Christopher Hitchens and Richard Dawkins and all these other prominent atheism supporters. And really, you're watching debates sort of from the sideline, and you try to consider both sides of an argument. And obviously, being fed all of the Christian side for 18 years, I kind of had plenty of information from that end, and now I started evaluating what the other side that was always forbidden and kind of always shunned upon, what they are presenting. And it turns out that, well, the atheist debaters, or at least the presenters, they actually make a lot more sense than the presenters or the debaters that are arguing in favor of faith. So
yeah, I mentioned
that really became something.
I mentioned with a previous guest that the more I learned about religion, and this continues to this day, the more I learn about religion, the less I know, but the more I learn about science, the more I know. It kind of becomes a clear thing that one is productive and helpful in the modern world, and the other not so helpful. You also mentioned in your email some difficulties with family members. What's going on there after you came out? Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. How far out are you?
So I am fairly out to my close friends and maybe the relatives that are similar in age. However, the older portion of my family does not fully know. They might recognize that maybe I don't show up in church and for church ceremonies. If there is a wedding in a family and if there's something kind of relatively harmless, yeah, I'll attend. But rest of the family, at least my parents, do know that I'm not too kind of big on the religion, although I haven't really informed them that I am an atheist, and I don't really use that label around them. I had some family members that informally cut ties maybe with me just because it's not very convenient to associate with me anymore. I had some friends that were very religious, and during my deconversion were trying to talk to me and debate me and say, well, you're just going through a phase, and all these natural platitudes of, something must have happened to you, and maybe there was some sort of a traumatic event. And yeah, I had a friend that kind of pretty much I had to draw a line in the sand with and say, if you're going to call me to just preach and talk about one thing, I don't value those calls anymore. And if you don't want to just accept me for who I am, you kind of make our friendship preconditioned with the Christianity, and then me going back to believing, then I guess we're going to have to part ways. And yeah, we haven't spoken since a couple of years ago, and I think the fact that I was going through a divorce at the time added to the challenge, where he was trying to maybe treat me as his pet project and see how he can fix my life with God, and unfortunately that didn't pan out.
Yeah, it's a funny thing, because if you tried the reverse, they would never stand for it. But because they have in their mind the morally based position, or the position's going to save your life or whatever, they sometimes friends can be a little bit rude about someone that loses their faith. But you're in a good place now. You're working. You got some friends. Everything's
Yeah, I'm in a good place. I'm happy. I'm in a relationship with a person that is not religious as well, and she is actually kind of quite serious about my life and how my atheism is progressing. And she always maybe heard about atheists, but in a negative way. But I'm kind of giving her a different perspective, where you can be a good person and be an atheist at the same time. I'm working. I got plenty of hobbies. Well, maybe not plenty of hobbies, but I spend plenty of time on the hobby that I do have.
yeah.
And try to enjoy life and be a good person, be a kind of humanist, make sure that the decisions that I make are not only good for me, but also don't harm the society in the process. And, just give back to the community where I can and serve as an advice for people that maybe have doubts themselves and maybe have some questions, and just kind of point them in the right direction. Like, hey, there's really not a good way of doing this. You can do it at your own terms. Just make sure that you ask questions, and if anybody is telling you that you're going through a phase and is not really giving you any meaningful answer, that means that they don't fully understand what you're going through, and just try to seek on your own and try to find out what you think might be best for you as a person, rather than certain groups trying to steer you in the one direction.
Sure. Now, overall, is your life better after leaving religion? What do you think?
I think it is definitely better. I think that things that I'm doing are out of the goodness of my heart, rather than being scared into thinking that you have to do certain things in order to be perceived as a good person by a deity or by a God. I think having accountability to no deity is actually better, because you are accountable to one another, to just basically people that are around you, and you don't have to have some sort of a imaginary being watching over your life, because a lot of people will kind of use the Pascal's wager and say, well, it's better for me to believe that there is a God, because I'll be better off, and in case I'm wrong, I didn't lose anything. Well, then you're not really honest about it. You're just doing it because you're scared, and that's not a good way to live a life. And I think being able to look at these important aspects of life, of either having faith or not having faith, is something that really opens up your mind, and now you can look at the full two sides of the story, evaluate it for yourself. Don't be scared into thinking one way or another, and just makes you a much more rational human being.
Excellent. I like it. Is there anything that we haven't covered that you want to throw in? Because I do want to wrap up and not take all of your time from you. Any last thoughts?
I think we covered a good chunk. I thank you for considering me as one of the examples where you can sort of almost reason yourself out of the faith, certainly with a little help of some material, either reading material or viewing material. And that's why it's beneficial to have these conversations and to hear people's stories, because you never know. I mean, most of the deconversion process or deconversion stories that we hear in the atheist community did really happen because some other person was deconverted and made their story public, and that's how people that have little doubts and maybe they've been squashing them throughout their life, they actually become curious and they start exploring on their own, and they actually deconvert themselves too.
Excellent. What a great way to round it up. Marcin, thank you so much for spending some time with me and sharing your story with our listeners.
Thank you, Phil. Appreciate it.
Hey, poor! You don't have to be poor anymore! Jesus is here!
Hi there. You doing okay? You making it through? Good. That finishes up the bulk of the content for the show. I do have my quick reminder, and again, gracious thank you to anyone who was, or maybe still is, a patron over at patreon.com/Phil. I'm doing something that you may have never, ever heard anyone say. Go cancel the contributions that you are providing to the Phil Ferguson Show. Please go transfer that. Part of the reason for that is A, I'm delighted that this is the situation. I don't need the money. B, I want you to fund someone else who's making a impact in the world or doing something that you like and or enjoy. So go to patreon.com, turn off your contributions to me. I think it's maybe down to like 50 people left. I might post one or two more shows there because the people who are patrons might hear this comment after they've skipped a few episodes. So if you are a patron of the Phil Ferguson Show, please go turn off your contribution and spread that money or give it 100% to someone else. That's fine. I'll be okay. Part of the rationale for that, and I've discussed it before, and I think I'm at a comfortable place with what I'm going to be doing currently. As I learn new information, I will update. The quick, too long, didn't want to listen to the past episode of this. The Department of Labor is in charge of a lot of things that have to do with retirement accounts that are related to your employment. Hence, the Department of Labor's involvement. And that comes from ERISA, which is the shortcut name of the law passed in 1974. And the Department of Labor has said that for an advisor to give a recommendation that you move your 401k to an IRA where they collect a fee, a la Phil Ferguson, Polaris Financial Planning, that is a prohibited transaction. Now, when I hear the word prohibited, that means don't do it. However, in the classic government style, it's prohibited, which means it's just flat out not allowed unless you file for an exemption. So I am not 100% sure yet what qualifies, what is sufficient for an exemption, and I don't need the hassle of fucking around with some auditor from the SEC or Department of Labor or FINRA getting in my business and telling me after the fact that I haven't done the exemption correctly. So I am providing a little bit of time for the industry to figure out what in the fuck that means. I want someone else to test the waters and deal with the Department of Labor to find out if the exemption needs to be really thorough, detailed, lengthy, and rigorous, or if it can be just a couple of sentences, put it on a piece of paper that you sign saying that I think this is a good idea and I agree with Phil that I should move my money over to his IRA. So what that means in the short term, anyone who is a client now or anyone who may be a client in the future, whether it's a client for Polaris Financial Planning or for some other person, if you want them to manage your account, just tell them, hey, I'm assuming you left your job or you changed jobs. I want to roll over my funds to you to manage. That way, the advisor is not making a recommendation. You are asking them to do it. That's one thing that can solve it. Another thing, I can talk about accounts in general, provide you educational information, just like I do on the show, because none of this is personalized investment advice. Please consult with your own financial advisor before taking any action. But anyway, your advisor can give you educational materials, educational information, answer general questions about how a 401k works, how the money moves out of your 401k into an IRA. Wherever you want to open that IRA is up to you, as long as they don't make any recommendation to then collect a fee. Of course, they could make a recommendation and then just not charge you, but that's kind of contrary to the whole business model of virtually all investment advisors of any kind, whether I like the style of what they're doing or not. The other thing that really is kind of on the edge for me of whether I should do it or not do it, and again, I'm taking the conservative approach at this time. I will no longer be providing any personal advice, even to clients, on their 401ks at their place of employment. in part because I think it could make the process of qualifying for an exemption more difficult. Because if I am giving you free advice on your 401k at work, and then you leave your job, I am going to have to justify why I did something for free that I now want to collect a fee on. Now, part of that, of course, if you have an advisor and they manage it, they're looking at it, they're checking it, they have way more choices, they can rebalance where they can't rebalance in your 401k because only you can do that. There's a lot of pluses, and that's probably a lot of the reasons you hired an advisor. It's something that I've done complimentary, for free, for clients and even for not clients for many, many years. And I may go back to that approach, but for now, I'm concerned that it might be problematic. So there we have it. If you have questions about how 401ks work, send me an email. We can talk about it. If it seems like something that could be good content for the show, which it probably is, I can make a segment on information and details about how 401ks work. So just some follow-up information on those little topics. Of course, if you have questions or ideas, or you think you found a super shitty fund, send me information, send me a request, send me your question via email, phil@polarisfinancialplanning.com, and I'll see if I can make a segment out of it, or maybe just give you a quick response if I can find the time for it. Coming up on future shows, maybe some of your ideas, but one thing, probably in a week to 10 days, I will have a segment on 2021 market performance. And I will go over a lot of the different things that I use and look at, what did the S&P 500 return? What did the mid-cap growth fund return? What did certain international funds? How did bond funds do? How did the real estate fund from Vanguard do? I'm just going to talk about those and what a reasonable expectation for you might be. Just on the surface, at least for now, I know that the S&P 500 returns, total returns, including dividends, is 26%, give or take, at this moment. But, I'll have the exact number after the year is over. So you could think, hey, maybe I should have made 26%. If you're all in U.S. stocks, for example, you have a portfolio where you're day trading, buying only U.S. stocks, and only large cap stocks, because that's what the S&P 500 is. If you have made what you think is a killer amount, say 20% for all your work, you did not make a killer amount. Because if you could have made 26 doing nothing, but you made 20 working like a dog, doing something fun, gambling, day trading, why the fuck did you do that? I mean, on a $100,000 portfolio, you just cost yourself $6,000, not to mention all the work involved, not to mention the higher tax rates involved, and all the expenses involved with tracking and charting, or getting extra data or streaming services to provide high quality data on stock activity. You could have spent all of that time, building Legos, for fuck's sake. If you aren't doing better than just the market with all these efforts, maybe you should consider changing your efforts and do something more enjoyable. Although, if you totally dig it and you having the time of your life and it only costs you $6,000 a year, knock yourself out. That's not what I'm going to be doing with my time. Keeping in mind, if you're in retirement or a few years from retirement, and let's just say for laughs, I'll make the math easy for me. If you're half in the stock market and half in bond portfolio, and that bond portfolio is the cushion and is designed to be relatively conservative to protect you from when the stock market goes down, because I want to take the risk and the volatility in stocks, and the bonds are meant to be the conservative part of the portfolio. And let's say bonds as a whole made 2%. I don't think they did this year, but let's say they made 2%. If half of your portfolio makes 26 and the other half makes 2, 26 plus 2 is 28, divided by 2, 14% might be your reasonable return. If you throw in some international, you throw in some real estate, the Vanguard REIT index, maybe a Scotia, of junk bonds or some other things, and maybe you don't have half in bonds, maybe it's 40%, then a reasonable return might not be 14, but 16, 17, 18%. Again, if you're heavily weighted in the U.S. stock market, it will be closer to the high 20s. I'll go over that in more detail in the future. And then probably later, an episode or two after that, I will do, I don't know if it's 13 or 14 years, probably 14 years. I'll do the 14-year follow-up and kind of how different methods of investing would have affected your portfolio over the last number of years. It's something I did several years ago. It was just a 10-year review. And now each year I just add one more year of data to it and not totally revamping what I had from before, because some of it now has happened in real time. And again, it's overly simplified, but it's just a point of discussion. And the idea is, what would you do? How would you do in a straight up target date fund? How would you do if your portfolio was mixed in a certain asset allocation of U.S. stocks, international stocks, and bonds, using the Vanguard Total Bond Market Index? How would you do in just 100% straight up stocks? And how would you do kind of sort of in the Polaris plan? Again, wildly oversimplified and not to be trusted or believed because I'm telling you. And maybe I twisted the data, changed my historical memories about what I did or might have done to make the numbers look better. But it's just something to look at, just something fun to think about. 4 different ways one could have invested, from the simplest to the most complicated. And what I do is, it is considerably complicated. I've come to discover. It seems easy to me because I do it all day. But anyway, that's some stuff coming up. Again, if you can leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcast Player, Stitcher. You can't go to, well, I don't want you to go to Patreon and contribute. All the future shows are coming out and they're not collecting a fee. So even if you have left the fee on, it's not being collected. So go change it. And at least for now, and I think probably for the long term, unless someone pays me a lot of money to read an ad, Pimsleur, if you're listening, we can talk. But if you don't want the ads, that's cool. Get any regular any regular podcast player that you want to use, whatever it is, and you can listen to the show, at least future episodes, with no commercials. I think I turned them off for all episodes. You let me know. Go listen to an old episode. Is there commercials or not? I don't know. Maybe I can't take them out after it's been done. Anyway, I wrap up and hope to see you. I think the most likely event that I'll be at in the near future is the American Atheist Conference. I believe it's April, Easter weekend, whenever that is, in Atlanta. I think I've got that right. What I'm going to do is see if they can have someone come on and talk about the conference and or their legal activities and some big wins that I've seen that they've had. So hopefully I can see you there. I would really look forward to that. And maybe we have masks on, and maybe we have hand sanitizer. Maybe we can't even really hug, but maybe we can be there. Who knows? Until then, ciao.